Hey there, Dave Keller here with Market Misbehavior. I'm doing a three-part video series called A Pilot's Guide to Investing, basically relating my experiences trying to learn to fly an airplane with my experiences learning to invest in the stock market. I've been in the financial industry for over 20 years now, almost 21 years. So I've had a decent experience trying to understand the stock market, following it closely, really through the lenses of behavioral finance and technical analysis. So for me, it's all about how we make decisions, why we make decisions, and understanding the investor psychology, what is fueling the decisions of all the other investors that you're essentially competing against. But it was a transformational experience for me learning to fly an airplane. This was, started about 10 years ago, and I had a test flight on it with a Cessna 172R, enjoyed it so much. I just loved the feeling, the freedom, and the opportunity. And as I started to learn to fly, and again, I'm still a student pilot. I never finished the private pilot license. At some point, I will get back in the air and do so. But for now, I enjoyed so much relating with my flight instructor, who it turns out was day trading stocks when he wasn't flying in an airplane, comparing notes with him, relating what we were doing, making decisions as a pilot with what we were doing, making decisions as investors, and just thought so much about that relationship. So these videos are really to share some of that experience with you and hopefully nudge your own thinking on what you're doing. So the first video was Be Prepared, talking about preparing for a flight and preparing for a trade. The second one, Be Aware, improving your situational awareness as an investor. Today, we're going to talk about the third piece, which is Be Ready. All right, so as I mentioned, this is a three-part series, A Pilot's Guide to Investing. Be prepared, be aware, and today we're going to talk about be ready. If this sort of thinking about investor decision-making, psychology, behavioral finance, charts, technical analysis, if that's of interest to you, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel. Hit a like if you could, and put a comment below the video. Today we're going to talk about basically having a backup plan. How good, scale of 1 to 10, how good do you feel about your backup plan for your portfolio right now? If the market moves completely against how you're positioned, how well would you gauge your own preparedness for what you're going to do as an investor? Let me know in the comments below. Let's get to the video. When I talk about be ready, I learned very early on that flying was about discipline, and it was about going through a set of motions. It was following a procedure. It was going through checklists to prepare the plane, thinking about what you're going to do, is planning everything ahead of time. There's a lot of visualization about how something was going to look, how it's going to feel. Then you would go and do it, and then you would review afterwards. But as you progress as a student pilot, you very quickly learn that it's a lot about emergency preparedness, right? 90+% of airplane accidents, especially private pilot accidents, have nothing to do with the plane, really. It's human error, right? And so you actually study accident reports. You look at where other private pilots have injured themselves or horribly something worse, and what happened, because usually it was poor decision making. It was some human error that caused the accident to happen. So what was it? You know what the number one cause of private pilot accidents are? It's running out of fuel, and it usually happens within a couple miles of your home airport, which literally means most of the time when a private pilot does not make it back to their airport safely, it's because they didn't have enough fuel. They thought they could get it finally there. They had this get-home-itis, they call it, just this need to get home, and you stop paying attention to what's actually happening. You focus more on your emotional need to finish that flight and get back on the ground. One of my mentors, Greg Morris, who's a financial mentor as well as a flying mentor, always used to say, it's better to be on the ground wishing you were in the air than in the air wishing you were on the ground. So when you learn about emergency preparedness, it really it goes through a bunch of routines. When something bad would happen, hopefully it never does, but if it does, you've already simulated those experiences already. You know how something's going to sound, how it's going to feel, what your body is going to do, what the plane's going to do, and you immediately learn how to adjust it. One of the things you practice the most are stalls, which is basically, to summarize, it's when the plane really just isn't able to fly anymore. The plane flies because of the wing, the shape of the wing, the airfoil, and what it's doing versus the air, basically, right? The air molecules. And there's lift that's created based on the shape of the wing and the pressures involved that allow the plane to stay up in the air. When you stall a plane, it's not your engine cutting out. It's actually when the plane's not able to fly, when the wings no longer produce lift, and it's because you've usually put it in a position that it can't fly anymore. More often than not, because you're just changing the angle based on what is appropriate. This usually happens right by the ground. So the most common places that you would accidentally stall is right during takeoff, because you have max power and you're trying to get up in the air, get off the ground. And the second one is during landing. And if you don't manage your power and your direction effectively, you'll stall the plane, and the plane will go down very quickly. What happens when you stall is literally the wings can't fly anymore. The wings can't produce lift, and the plane just goes down. And when it happens way up in the air, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a little uncomfortable. When it happens right by the ground, that's when something really bad can happen. So what you do is you go way up in the air, you go to 4,000, 6,000 feet, and then you practice stalls. You put the plane in a configuration like you're taking off or that you're landing, and then you intentionally stall the plane. You make it do what it's not supposed to do, so you can feel what it sounds like. There's a stall warning horn that's this really horrible sound. It kind of goes off. It sounds miserable, and then the plane buffets and shudders, and then it goes boom, and it's like you're going over the top of a roller coaster and coming down the other end. And so again, you learn exactly what you need to do based on your airplane and based on the plane and based on the setup of it, configuration. You can learn, here are the steps that I take if I'm approaching that stall. And you learn to basically prevent the stall from happening and stopping it before you get to that point. And those lessons come in handy, because there were times I never actually had a stall right by the ground, but certainly got close to them, and then I knew exactly, okay, wait, this isn't right, and you know what to do, lower the nose or give more power, whatever you need to do to correct the problem. But it's all about the routines. It's all about going through and having your game plan in mind ahead of time. One of the most uncomfortable experiences I had in the air was the first time we did a simulated engine cutout. And what happens is you're flying straight and level, and then your instructor just yanks out the throttle all the way, and the plane just and you're not even expecting it. You kind of go like, what is happening? And he goes, all right, you just lost your engine. Now what do? And it's like, I'll tell you what you do is you freak out and you panic and you sweat and you're trying to fumble around. You're trying to just figure out why the plane's not working. And, you figure out what, you find the checklist and you figure out what you need to do, and you get it kind of back up and running. But eventually, once you do simulated engine cutouts, it doesn't bother you that much because you've seen it. It's not an emotional reaction anymore. It is an emotionless reaction. It's a rational reaction. You've gathered the data, you see what's going on, you make adjustments to make sure that it's not going to be a problem anymore, and you fix it. Another example I would share with you in terms of emergency preparedness is when you prepare for emergencies, which is basically when things are going well. I'm often asked when people start losing money in their portfolio. They have a position that's going really well, and then all of a sudden it starts going down, and they say, all right, what do I do now? How should I think about this? And my answer to them is always, all right, first thing, you should have thought about this a long time ago when everything was going great. You don't wait until your engine cuts out in the airplane to figure out, all right, now what am I going to do? Look around and see if there's an airport nearby. Think, well, is there a frequency I should be on? And try to look up something on your iPad. That is not the time to do it. When things are beautiful, when things are great, you're flying fine, everything's working great, there are no issues, that is when you are always thinking of emergency scenarios. So you're always taught to always have a landing plan, right? So you're always looking around seeing there's an abandoned airfield over there. I remember flying around Boston. I used to fly between my home airport and over where we lived by the water. We would fly over this abandoned airstrip, and it was shut down. It was an old Air Force base or something, but I knew in a pinch, if I was around that area, the runway was still plenty long and I could land there pretty easily. So I'd always think about where I was relative to that abandoned airstrip or other airports around the area. But you're always taught to do that when things are going well. On my first long solo, I actually flew from Norwood outside of Boston over to I think it was Orange County in Connecticut, and then down to Groton, which is right on the ocean, and then back up northeast past Providence, Rhode Island to get back to my home airport. Now remember that last leg, I'd done a couple landings, a couple takeoffs, all went well. I was by myself in the cockpit, feeling really good about myself, and I was looking over. I took pictures of Providence, downtown Providence, off the right wingtip, because it was a beautiful day, nice and clear. Cape Cod was way off in the distance, but it was just this really nice shot of Providence Harbor. But I also knew off my left wingtip that North Central Airport was just a couple miles off to the left. And I knew at that moment, if something would happen while I was enjoying the view, I knew what frequency I needed because I had it jotted down on my knee pad. I knew where the wind was, and I knew what runway I would need to land on. And I knew, given my altitude, I could pretty much safe to say I could get safely to that airport, even with no power in the airplane anymore. So you're thinking about that when things are going great, when you don't have an emergency. So as investors, what's so funny is when things are going well, we tend to just, give a pat on the back, feel pretty good, and sort of go on our day. And, a wise man once said, don't confuse brains with a bull market. When everything's going up, when your portfolio is doing well, it's easy to assume that is based on your skill as an investor. It's actually what we usually do. But you have to remember that there's a balance with skill and with luck. Part of the market going higher and your portfolio doing well is just luck that you're in stocks or in ETFs that are doing well right now. And think of it as a balance. Think about what you can tweak, what you can change, what you can focus on. That's within skill. That's in that skill bucket. And luck is going to work out on its own. So when things are going well, when your portfolio is doing well, the markets overall have been going up. Overall, it's been risk on versus risk off. Hopefully, your investment experience has been fairly positive and you're doing pretty well in whatever portfolio or portfolios that you're managing. So now is the time. If things have been going well, now is the time to think about alternative scenarios. What if the S&P goes down 10 to 20% over the next month? What if the S&P breaks down through its 50-day moving average and keeps going to its 200-day moving average? What if the S&P retests 3,200, which was the low from last September and October? If you're in other asset classes, what if Bitcoin that you've been riding higher goes back down to 32,000 or 22,000 or 14,000? What would happen between now and then for you to think about maybe taking some of that risk off or taking some profits? So when things are going well, when your portfolio is good, you don't necessarily need to be making changes to your portfolio, to your holdings, although that may be appropriate. But what you do want to do is think about scenarios, think about alternate scenarios. Let's say this run that I've had up until this moment changes tomorrow, changes in the next hour. What am I going to do? What am I going to see? How is that going to look? What indications would I see? What lines in the sand would tell me that I need to kick into an emergency plan and get out of what had been working that is no longer working? So my recommendation or my goal for you with this video is to think about your own emergency preparedness in life, but especially as an investor. What I learned as a pilot is when things are going well, that's when you think about emergency planning. That's when you have a game plan in mind in case things turn south very quickly. So if you're doing well as an investor, which I certainly hope you are, think about how things would start to not look good and where you would need to start to reconsider things. And write that down now so when it actually happens, you have your game plan ready to kick into gear. So in the comments below, do me a favor, let me know where do you feel like you have a pretty good sense? Where is it that your emergency plan maybe needs a little more work, right? Where is it that you feel you don't have as good of a good plan in place as you could? Let's work on some of those things together. If this sort of thinking about investor behavior, decision making is of interest to you, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel. Give me a like, put a comment below the video. Tell me how you feel about being ready as an investor. From everyone here at Market Misbehavior, I'm Dave Keller. Be well. Talk to you again soon.